Good morning and welcome back to Morning Movie News. I apologize for last week's two-day hiatus, but as I noted on Friday, I was moving offices and I was at the X-Men Days of Future Past junket and global premiere. So I hope you'll check out those interviews, both from the junket and the red carpet. There's a link in the video description for the playlist for all of that coverage. But today I want to catch up on some of the news I missed, and especially the top stories that you guys requested to have covered here on Morning Movie News. The first, of course, is the Power Rangers movie. This had a surprising amount of traction. A lot of you are very curious as to how this is going to turn out, and I would say it's almost a little bit the same boat as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, two extremely popular, children's properties that have a very intense fan base that lasts, it stands the test of time, I guess you could say. So just because you might not be in the target demographic for Power Rangers any longer doesn't mean you're not a fan for many people. Unfortunately, I am not a Power Rangers fan. I never got Power Rangers. Plenty of people do. It's still on to this day. They just constantly reinvent it. This is from Saban Entertainment, and I think this is very interesting that they're opening the doors to maybe some of their other properties as well if this works out. Maybe we'll get a Sailor Moon movie. They are even making a Gem movie, right? Gem and the Holograms. So why not Sailor Moon? This is Saban trying to get into this field just like Hasbro has with Transformers and G.I. Joe, and you see Mattel getting into the space with Barbie. So this is part of a larger trend. Now, the takeaway I have from this news is in the press release why Saban said they got into business with Lionsgate, why they said they picked Lionsgate to take charge of this new Power Rangers movie and bringing it to the big screen, I think obviously in a way that has to appeal to an even broader demographic than it does now. And they said that they think that because Lionsgate did such a good job with Hunger Games, that makes sense, because, they have a lot of fighting, it's kids, fighting to the death, kind of. I think the stakes got raised a lot, significantly in Catching Fire. But then also Saban goes on to reference Twilight and Divergent. That to me is fascinating because you have a lot of those movies, those two films focus substantially on the emotional relationships between these youthful characters. They are more soap opera than Hunger Games, for instance. Twilight and Hunger Games are the big juggernauts there, and Divergent is going to see if it can maybe join their ranks with its second film. It's very strong out of the gate for Divergent, but it never quite materialized at the box office in the same way as those other two franchises did. But still, to see this reference from Saban means to me that they're going to try and play up the personal side of the Power Rangers. There's only one girl, so I guess instead of a love triangle, maybe we're going to have like a love pentagram. There are 5 members of the Power Rangers, right? So you got 1 girl and 4 guys. That'll be interesting to see how that works out. Although I think in more recent incarnations they've added another girl, so it's 2 girls, maybe 3 guys, or they've upped the numbers to 6. Somebody down below, if you're a big Power Rangers fan, tell us what the current dynamics are. Now, from what I have seen flipping through channels of the Power Rangers, they do sometimes address the personal lives of these characters, but I don't think it's really as huge as, for instance, Twilight or Divergent. And Hunger Games, I think, is a happy medium. If it could really strike the tone of Hunger Games, that could be great. But I think they're going to have to go a long way to make Power Rangers be taken as seriously as the Hunger Games has been able to be taken. Even Divergent. But remember, Power Rangers wear those helmets. You can't really see their faces. That could be really difficult. James Marsden, a.k.a. Cyclops, who was on the red carpet on Saturday night for X-Men Days of Future Past. He's in my interview there if you want to check that out. But he often talked about the fact that it was very hard for him to connect with audiences and to really get the character of Scott Summers to come across because you couldn't see his eyes. And that has really been a roadblock for a lot of actors, and they speak to that whenever they have a role where you can't really see their face. So it'll be, we might potentially see a redesign for the Power Rangers. But I'm just curious, if you are not a Power Rangers fan, do you think there's anything that Lionsgate and Saban can do to make you go and see a Power Rangers movie? I'm always open to the idea of any kind of movie, but, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, their new trailer looks really fancy in terms of special effects, but it still seems to skew quite young. And so if a Power Rangers movie were to skew that young, I don't really know, unless for review purposes, obviously, of course, I would see such a film on my personal time. And I'm just curious to how you guys feel about this. And also, Power Rangers fans, how would you feel if this went the route of Hunger Games, Twilight, and Divergent? Do you want to see your favorite Power Rangers hook up instead of fight? All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story, this also got quite a number of requests to be covered, and this is that not only did Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. get picked up for a second season, which I think confuses a lot of us, although I think a lot of us rightly suspect that it's just to save face for Marvel. And although I have to say, to be fair to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., one, I am not watching it, so I can't speak to its quality on an ongoing basis. And two, a number of its current fans who have stuck with it do say that it has improved remarkably. So perhaps it will continue to improve. Maybe that's why it was greenlit for a second season. Maybe ABC sees potential. And I would also, though, say on that note, expect it to continue to evolve. They're going to have to really try and work this out to try and make it the hit that it can be. And I'm not quite sure what they can do to draw people back in, because it seems even these big cameos from the movies, well, big for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., small for the movies in terms of the talent they're bringing over. I think Nick Fury, Samuel L. Jackson's the biggest name to date, but Sif, Jamie Alexander stopped by. But it'll be interesting to see if they can get the viewers who left, like myself, to return. Under what circumstances would that happen? But I think the bigger story, and what I really want to focus on today, is that Agent Carter, kind of like the prequel to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., because it's supposed to focus on how S.H.I.E.L.D. was founded. Agent Carter has been greenlit as well for a smaller pickup, 13 episodes. The word is it's going to fill in the blank for when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. takes a breather, so that the spot can stay consistent. It can at least have Marvel television airing in that time slot. So Agent Carter sounds like a very interesting show to me. Now, of course, again, it's going to be network television, but let's not forget that over on ABC, where this is as well, Lost was quite successful on network television as well. But I think that's because Lost was an episodic. Lost was something that, episodic means you can tune in just to one episode. But, well, that's the terminology how I'm using it here. Lost, though, was like cable television, and was one of the things that started the current trend of high-quality TV, even though, ironically, at the end, I think a lot of people would not call Lost high-quality TV. But anyway, Lost was something you had to watch consistently in order to get the full experience. And I think that until Marvel and ABC embrace that for their network shows here, for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Carter, they're not going to enjoy the same success. Now, on a side note, Gotham is also continuing to pick up steam by dropping more and more hints. For instance, late last weekend, it was revealed in a teaser poster, there was like a casino sign in the background, and they showed a Joker playing card. And it was confirmed that Joker will be joining the series, but the producers have said it will be over time and very carefully thought out. So they're really going to expect lots of hints. So when you're watching Gotham, be prepared to look for drops of hints of the Joker coming on board. But I would also suspect that the delay in bringing him on board is to find a perfect actor. That must be an incredibly difficult talent search, and it's so crucial they find the right actor who can, I think, kind of allude to what Heath Ledger did, because I think that this whole series is very Nolan-esque. I think they're really building on what Nolan did with his trilogy, but at the same time not be a copycat of Heath Ledger, because who could do that? So it has to be a way to make the character their own. Perhaps they'll do, I guess if they're just hinting at it, I was thinking maybe they'll do the origin story. It'll be interesting to see if because the Joker does have an interesting origin story in The Killing Joke, although you could choose to believe whether or not that's true. Some argue that is in the Dark Knight, as Heath Ledger's character did, that the Joker just makes up origin stories to mess with people. But it'll be interesting to see how that's explored there. Now, but Agent Carter, this show is, I'm curious, it has some predecessors, which it's going to have to compete with over in the UK, which I'll get to in a moment. But first, let's discuss the synopsis. This is Peggy Carter, Haley Atwell, who I loved in Captain America: The First Avenger. She was actually one of my favorite parts of that movie. I didn't like the first Captain America, loved the second one. So I'm glad she's getting this television show. I think that the short film that she did was quite good, and that's what led to this being greenlit as a series. But anyway, this deals with her life after World War II. She comes to the United States, but she's still also, like a lot of women in the UK, dealing with having to return to civilian life as a woman after World War II in that time period. And even in the synopsis, it even says, deals with being, quote-unquote, marginalized as men return home and women are expected to return to their traditional role in society. And then also, apparently while she's building S.H.I.E.L.D., it's also going to focus on her life as a single woman in America mourning Steve Rogers. Now, I hope she gets over him pretty quickly, because I think that's just going to get old, because we all know he's not coming back until she's much, much older, as we saw in Captain America 2. So there's really no suspense there, and I don't think anybody wants to watch a series about someone who never gets over someone else. It's like that friend that you try and support until at one point you're just like, you need to move on, for the better of yourself and everyone around you. So I think that it'll be interesting to see at what point she does that and how they're able to keep Steve Rogers in the mix. Now, I think the focus should be on building S.H.I.E.L.D. and also Hydra, also continuing, how they're kind of continuing on parallel lines. I think that could be fascinating. And this is also fascinating because it's really just like Captain America, the Winter Soldier did well because it had so much, it was so much built on real things and real problems in the world and philosophical and political arguments. I think Agent Carter could succeed because it's built on a real life aspect of history, and that's the building of the world of espionage. World War II was very big with spies, and it led to these creations of these agencies after World War II. So the CIA as well, and it was fascinating to watch. I've actually done some reading on this, as in my personal life. That's something I was interested in. The founding of the CIA is actually quite fascinating, and I've also read some stuff on the British intelligence services. I'll recommend a book for you in a moment. But the thing basically was so fascinating about it is that there was nothing for them to reference. When espionage agencies were created, it was basically created from scratch. It was as if you decided to start an espionage agency. Just imagine how that would be. You just have to decide you're going to start lying and how you could maybe build some kind of covert stuff, and it was so bare bones. It really was to that level. It wasn't. They didn't hit the ground running. It was really literally if you and I decided to start a spy agency right now. And the UK was really at the forefront of this, especially during World War II. I'm sure many of you are aware of movies like Enigma and also Bletchley Circle. That's a big popular television show in the UK. I believe BBC or maybe ITV. I'm not sure, but it plays on PBS here in the United States. Very good show. And it's actually raised the profile of what a lot of women did as code breakers during not only World War II, but what it was like for them to have to deal with society after they left the war and had to return to their status as women. So this is already being explored on another show, so it'll be interesting to see how Agent Carter can not just rip off the Bletchley Circle. Then also there's another show called The Midwife, which is also ridiculously popular, at least over in the UK. It's available on Netflix if you'd like to watch it. It's very good. It's about nurses, but it's also in the same time period and about how roles are changing in society post-World War II. Both are very, very good shows. I highly recommend both of them, and I think that if Agent Carter is to succeed, it has to both owe a lot to those shows, yet not rip them off. And so anyway, if you want to read a great book about this, so you can maybe be a little bit more prepared for Agent Carter, I highly recommend A Life in Secrets, the story of Vera Atkins and the Lost Agents of SOE by Sarah Helm. Fascinating reading, not only about women working in World War II and how many of them tragically gave their lives even when they were not expecting to be called to do so, but stepped up to the plate nonetheless, and also just about how the world of espionage was being born at that time. It's great reading. I could not recommend it more highly. So I'm very interested to see. I hope the focus isn't so much on Peggy Carter's personal life, but on this great moment in history when roles for women were changing, both in espionage and in society, and also the espionage units itself. Of course, we'll be dealing with S.H.I.E.L.D. here, but I think this could be a very interesting show, and I have high hopes for this one, and I'll definitely be tuning in. But we'll see. This is tricky, and as I said, it has pretty big shoes to fill with Bletchley Circle and Call the Midwife, so we'll see if ABC and Marvel can pull it off. All right, so that's the second story of the day. The third story of the day is that it looks like they might have found their director for Star Trek 3. Of course, J.J. Abrams left to go and do Star Wars, and Paramount was kind of left holding the bag. And it looks like they're going to be settling on Roberto Orci, the screenwriter of the films, with Alex Kurtzman, but Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Orci recently split up. They're a long-standing duo in Hollywood working together, both as writers and producers. They're quite prolific, and they worked on a number of very big franchises. Now, I think maybe before Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out, people might have been more excited about this news, but people are so upset about The Amazing Spider-Man 2, or at least a number of people are, a very vocal contingent, and a lot of people are blaming the writers, and I can see to some degree why they would do that. I think the writing was very sloppy, but there's something else I want to address to that in a moment. But I think that, so Orci basically is taking some of the blame for this, the fallout, and so people might be like, why would you choose him to do The Amazing Spider-Man, to direct Star Trek 3 if he really messed up so badly with Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, apparently it's, I believe the production company behind it, I think it's Skydance, I'm not sure, but the production, the company that's funding this and really pushing it is on Roberta Orci's side. But word is that Paramount is reluctant, probably because of the reasons I just mentioned. Now, I don't really dislike Roberta Orci and Alex Kurtzman. I think that they've had good and bad moments in their resume. For instance, Cowboys and Aliens was really bad, and I don't know anybody would hire anyone who wrote Cowboys and Aliens. But I loved The Island from Michael Bay. I think that's actually a hidden gem. I actually did like The Legend of Zorro quite a bit. And I liked the first Star Trek that they wrote. A lot of people liked Fringe. But I had problems with Star Trek Into Darkness as well, just as I did with Amazing Spider-Man 2. So I think that maybe if Orci's watched very carefully, it'll work out. But you know, at the very least, you know he's committed. He really is involved in building this new Star Trek alternate universe, I guess, because it's not a reboot. They split the timeline quite cleverly so they wouldn't have to erase the past films and television shows. But he's involved in the comic books as well. And so Orci, he is a fan and he is really committed. The question is just, does he have the talent to deliver? So it's looking like he's going to be the director, though, and so I'm curious how you guys feel about that. But even more so, something else one of you brought to my attention is that some people are demanding to see the director's cut of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Because when you think back to the trailers, I even mentioned this in my review, there's tons and tons and tons of stuff that's not included in the movie. So you have to wonder, what happened to it? I guess one of the most obvious examples is when Harry Osborn tells Peter Parker that Oscorp had him under surveillance, and that was never in the movie. And there are actually a number of things that didn't quite make it to the movie. But I have to say, I think even if there is a director's cut, I don't think it's going to save this film, because it's not going to change the choices like Electro and Dr. Kafka that just seem not to fit with the rest of what was going on there. And I think, as I stated in my review, I think Sony is so intent on building this cinematic universe that they forgot about the movie they were currently making. But speaking of future films, I'm curious, are you still interested in The Amazing Spider-Man 3? Do you want to go and revisit Peter Parker? Do you want to go back to this world? Or do you want to take Sony's lead and go to see a Sinister Six movie? Do you want to just maybe leave Spider-Man behind? Andrew Garfield doesn't even want to make any more of these after 3, so maybe just leave him at 2, right? And head over to Sinister Six and see how that film does. But I'm also curious, considering the fact that this film didn't click for a lot of people on many levels, are you even interested in a Sinister Six movie still? I mean, it's going to have different talent, so that might be its saving grace. Drew Goddard is going to be writing and directing. He's from Cabin in the Woods, and so maybe he will be what that movie needs. Maybe Mark Webb, lost control of this franchise, didn't have a strong enough grip on it. And, of course, Orci and Kurtzman can argue about whether or not they should have been involved and if they ruined it. But I'm just curious, is the Spider-Man franchise ruined, or do you think it can bounce back? Some of you I know loved the movie, but I'm just curious. And for those of you who did love it, are you upset they're going to Sinister Six next? So please write down below what you think of Roberta Orci as a choice for Star Trek #3. Do you think Paramount is right to have cause for concern and to have a pause about whether or not to do this? And what do you think of Spidey 2? Do you think there should be a director's cut? Did you wonder what happened to all that missing footage? For instance, also, I believe Aunt May never said the line, secrets have a cost, but so does the truth, or answers, and that was never in there as well. So anyway, write your thoughts down below on that as well. So those are the 3 stories of the day. Now, the viewer question comes from Peng Autocraft, whose real name is Linus. So Peng Autocraft says, Dear Grace, smiley face, with a D. I love, that's like the grinning smile. I love it. Huge, huge fan, and I've been watching for years from Michigan. Thank you, Linus. I really appreciate that. Linus says, here's my question. With A Million Ways to Die in the West fast approaching, I looked at the IMDb page and saw that Christopher Lloyd is in it as Emmett Brown from Back to the Future, and I was wondering what you thought about this and what his character is doing. Thanks a lot, Linus. Another smiley face. Well, I picked this question because I believe it was in front of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, actually. They played this new trailer for A Million Ways to Die in the West. And there was even another new trailer on top of that in front of Neighbors. And one of these trailers did feature Doc Brown at the end. They had him basically with the DeLorean in like a barn like he was in Back to the Future 3. And Seth MacFarlane's like, what are you doing? And he's like, nothing. And Seth MacFarlane's like, okay. And I hope that maybe Emmett Brown or Christopher Lloyd as Emmett Brown has more to do in the film, and that just didn't give away his entire cameo. Because I think that's kind of a waste for a trailer. Now, the only reason I can see them doing that in a trailer, giving that away, is that the film isn't testing well. And we've been discussing this a little bit. I believe I've brought it up before, that because the Western does so poorly at the box office, you have to wonder if A Million Ways to Die in the West can overcome that kind of Western funk that American audiences seem to always smell when one comes around. We'll see if it can combat that. Now, I have to say, these new trailers are very strong and very good, but there's so much new material in them, I start to worry that maybe I've seen the whole film already. So I think it's really, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you don't show the better material, no one's going to show up to your movie anyway. Perhaps if you, what's the line? When have you showed too much? And I'm curious, if you've seen all 3 of these A Million Ways to Die in the West trailers, do you agree with me? Do you feel you've seen the whole movie? And also, is combined his names. Is a Christopher Lloyd as Emmett Brown cameo enough to get you into the theater? Or if you feel like you already know about it, or you saw it in the trailer, or you're like, I can take a pass? Or are you curious if more is going to happen? I just also think it's interesting that based on the trailers so far to date with these 3 trailers, it really does look like Seth MacFarlane has made a live-action Family Guy, complete with modern current references, non sequiturs, I'm sure lots of cutaways. It'll be very interesting to see if it can work in live action. I think it looks very good, but again, I have some concern now that I've seen the entire film. So Linus, we'll see. Maybe he's just doing a cameo, or maybe he'll help save the day. Maybe Seth MacFarlane will get to ride in that DeLorean. That could be pretty interesting. I did read a story, actually, Seth MacFarlane owns a DeLorean, thanks to his huge animation empire. He also has an IMAX theater in his basement. There's a fascinating kind of like interview and behind-the-scenes article on him that recently ran in one of the industry trades. I will find that story and put the link in the video description so you can read it. It's very interesting to read about him. He seems like a very interesting, unique individual, and I'm really curious to see, some people loved him or hated him as the Oscar host, and I'm curious to see if he can really be a marquee star in the live-action world as much as he is successful in TV animation. I think the jury's still out on that, but it's a great article, and I loved him as the Oscar host. I thought he was quite inspired. I will never forget Flight with Socks, that We're Gonna Roll, Let's Roll the Plane, and Cutting to a Dryer. I think was one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen, in its simplicity. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, and anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.